Not as dramatic as that one.
Yeah. We are on the lives. All righty. Welcome everybody to House Energy and Digital Infrastructure on Thursday, February 13th. We are here with Legislative Council to walk through a draft bill that our committee is going to be considering. And we will quickly introduce ourselves and then let our folks joining us on Zoom introduce themselves, and then we'll turn it over to Rick. So I'm Representative Kathleen James from the Betty 4 District.
John Sperry, Rick Bailey, Oil 2. Chris Morrow, Wyndham, Windsor, Bennington. Michael Southwood, Caledonia 2.
Pittsburgh, Howland, Rutland 4.
Graham Clubner, Chittenden 13, Burlington.
Mark William, 2.
And Lisa Gobbin, Legislative IT Consultant.
And Rick Sagel, Office of Legislative Counsel.
And we miss Jack.
And we missed Jack.
Jack Locker, Committee Assistant.
Super. All right. Take it away, Rick.
All right.
You're walking through a bill that you drafted for us.
Walking through it before that, Madam Chair, I'm going to share my screen and go over just briefly. Jack, I'm going to request a share screen through Zoom. You may believe that. Just to go over the ADS statutes, just kind of give you a frame of reference so you kind of know what we're going to do here. And I have the sharing tower now. So I came in a few weeks ago. I'm sure you all remember that testimony vividly. I can give you details about ADS and about IT in general. But again, just as a reminder, the statutes that govern ADS are in the executive title, Title 3, specifically Chapter 56. It's a relatively new set of statutes, 2019. And you may remember there's an executive order that originally kind of started this whole ADS idea, which eventually was put in the statute. So the proposed committee bill only proposes to edit one of these statutes, but I still want to kind of go over the landscape here. So 3301, we are not going to, as far as the script is concerned, change anything in 3301. This creates the agency. It lays out the responsibilities of ADS. It's good maybe to be aware of some of these responsibilities. Some are more important than others. But you can kind of, I won't go over it, but just kind of give you an idea. This is where their authority lies in statute. 3302 is the appointment of the secretary and also given the title of Chief Information Officer. That's 3302. This is all about that secretary's duties, responsibilities. 3303 is a statute that we'll be having some suggested changes to. This is the reporting, the records, review requirements. The Deputy Auditor, Tim Ash, was in last week to kind of go over some, what he would be some good ideas to consider. I'll go over that in a second. So this is 3303. 3304 is the creation of the Information Technology Internal Service Fund. It's just very simple. It's created and it says that it must be this subsection B there tells you how that money is established and approved. 3305.
I'm sorry, can I?
Yeah.
We were. What does the Internal Service Fund do?
What does it do?
So we putting the pot of money that we're putting money into, and it's used for. Let me just read. Oh, I see. Okay, it's just the chargeback mechanism.
Yeah, you would appropriate funds through the general fund,
Yeah.
and that can be moved to the Internal Service Fund just for ADS purposes. Did you have, Madam Chair, something to add to that?
Just that I had asked Secretary Riley Hughes about it the other day, and it sounded to me, and I'm probably going to butcher this, so we should ask her about it. But as we start to learn about how we fund technology projects in the state, it sounded to me like a bank account, a fund, where when we appropriate one-time money for a project, it goes and sits there. And I think that there's some excess, a little bit of excess revenue in there, but not much. More?
This is where the funds from the various agencies and departments that are
Mhm.
charged for the services of ADS. That this is also where they go.
So
Yeah.
I'm still.
Client entities.
If we have, if we're $50 million for an overhaul of some other departments, IT systems, would it go into the fund or does it go directly to the other agencies?
So I don't know. I think it depends how you appropriate that money. Normally, you know, if you look at the budget acts or the budget adjustment acts, you can kind of see where that money is appropriated to.
Right.
Sometimes it's put into a fund like this. Otherwise, it's usually just appropriated from the general fund to ADS to do X, to do Y. This one I'm not too familiar with as far as why this exists. As apart from what the statute says,
Right.
to charge the client entities, other state agencies for their work. That would be for them.
Oh,
Heard some, I've heard that. Is the secretary with us?
no, but
Okay.
I was just gonna say, so as I speculated and probably remembered incorrectly, so Secretary Riley Hughes is coming in to talk about her budget request, and we can ask her about that, and she knows.
I can give you a little bit more information, having listened to appropriations presentations about this. So apparently it's money that the legislature has to direct projects to this fund. So I think there's a half a dozen projects with funding in this fund now. It's kind of like a capital expense fund or something for putting money aside to pay for major projects. But we have to authorize certain projects to go into that fund. There's about, I think we've had $23 million in it originally, almost. There hasn't been very much spent yet, but there are, I could tell you what anyway, there's half a dozen projects that are in that fund right now. And we have to, I should say, authorize specific project and specific amounts of money to go into it. So it's not exactly like saving money for the wide variety of projects. And some projects have other funding, like federal funding, which are not in this fund. So that's
Good. Thank you. Yeah.
I don't believe that's correct.
Okay, so since we're now rampantly speculating on YouTube, I'm going to put a pin in this for sure and reiterate that I think we should ask Secretary Riley Hughes when she comes in to talk about the budget.
And that's something, if you, after she speaks about it and gives clarification, you have additional specific questions, I will research it.
Yeah.
And that way I have
That'd be great.
specific answers for you, as opposed to just my, like, oh yeah, I think this is, you know, what it's for. 3305, again, we're not gonna, again, for this proposal, not gonna touch 3305. This is definitions, automated decision system, state procurement, inventory. Again, the ADS shall conduct a review and make an inventory of all automated decision systems being developed, employed, or procured. Then you have another fund, the Technology Modernization Special Fund. This one's a little bit more specific as to the reasons it was created. You can see here the funds, what they're consisted of, and priorities. The legislature was much more directed in this creation of this fund as opposed to the other fund. Why? I don't know. I can get you answers, but just realize this is also in the ADS chapter.
I'm sorry.
I was thinking about.
That fund I was yes. So sorry.
Okay. So that's the end of the ADS chapter. I'll go into the proposal for the committee bill. Switch my document here. Okay. So as I mentioned, this is just going to be modifying potentially 3303, which is the reporting and the records and review requirement. This language mostly came from the deputy auditor. This after they conducted their audit of ADS, he came and spoke about these recommendations. So this is the actual language that would make these changes that he's suggesting. So in their annual report and budget, currently ADS must, subdivision 1 there, must include performance metrics and trends, including baseline and annual measurements for each division of the agency. And the underlined part is the new proposed language and the extent to which projects in subdivision 4, I'll get that in a second, have met their business goals. Get on to the second page 4. I'm going to skip over 2 or 3 for a second. And outline information, including scope, and we're removing schedule and proposing we add in original and current estimated data completion, original and current estimated budget, and status for IT projects with a total cost of $500,000 or greater. So, going back to one, you may remember the auditor, wanted to ensure that ADS was including, kind of a confirmation that these projects are meeting their business goals. One recommendation I may have to consider is this phrase business goals is not defined.
Right.
So, maybe ADS is aware of what you mean when you tell them to include or what, that they've met their business goals. But if you don't define it, it allows them to define it and what their business goals may be, something to consider.
So, in other words, that's not defined elsewhere in statute or elsewhere in the ADS statute. That's a phrase that ADS might be able to shed light on, and or we could define it to say this is what we need. Yeah, Rep. Kleppner?
I also think it would be useful, to have the business goals defined before they undertake the project. And then this could be, how well are you doing versus the stated goals at the initiation of the project?
That's interesting. Can we remember to ask Secretary Riley Hughes about that? Because one thing we could ask about and or do would say, have met the goal, as defined in the pre-project, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's, and I'm sure that maybe that exists in standard form that,
Are we making suggestions on language now, or do you want to walk through the whole
we
thing?
want to walk through the whole thing, sir.
Okay.
Thank you, Representative Morrow.
Okay. So we'll move on. No changes to 2 and 3, but just so you know what's going on here. They must provide a financial report of revenues and expenditures to date for the current fiscal year. 3, cost avoided or saved as a result of technology optimization for the previous fiscal year. 4, an outline summary of information, including scope. So the current language says schedule budget. And instead of the phrase schedule budget, the suggestion is to change that to original and current estimated date of completion, original and current estimated budget, because I believe the issue is that ADS just includes the current dates and they change them out when that changes. If they're on a project and it's running late, they will update that date to reflect the new scheduled estimated date of completion or budget. So this would require that they keep that original number or date on their report, or you'll see here in a second on their website. Okay, keep going.
Was 500,000 or greater is that from the auditor or where did that come from?
That's already in statute.
Okay, great.
And that's kind of the number that at some point the assembly
Settled on.
Yeah. Number 5, an annual update to the strategic plan prepared pursuant to subsection C. No changes there. Number 6, a summary of independent reviews as required by subsection D of the section. I'll show you that in a second. And this is new language, including any uses of the waiver authority by the Chief Information Officer pursuant to D3. So I'm going to quickly go down to D, just so you have a frame of reference. If there is a IP project with a total cost of $1 million or greater, they have to get an independent review. However, in this subdivision 3 of D3, the CIO, meaning the Secretary of ADS, can waive that requirement to get the review if the CIO believes, and the his or hers marked out for when we see those, we correct them as we go. That's our current drafting style, is to get rid of the gendered language. Such a review would be duplicative of one or more reviews that have been or will be conducted under a separate federal or state requirement. If waived, such waiver shall be in writing and in accordance with procedures. So the proposal in this bill, going back up to page 2, is to end the report and a report say, make sure you include that in your report that you use that waiver authority. We're not stopping the waiver authority, but you're making it more transparent. Number 7, the agency budget submission. Number 8, an annual update to the inventory required by section 3305. Note again, no changes until we get to subsection B, but I'll go over 9. A report on the expenditures of the tech special fund, a list of projects receiving funding from the fund in the prior fiscal year, and a list of prioritized recommendations for projects to be funded from the fund in the next fiscal year. Okay, subsection B, records. This is not part of the report. This is now just how they keep records. So if there's a project with a total cost of $500,000 or greater, a business case, which is currently in statute, including life cycle costs, and the proposal here is to add in the phrase client entity staffing costs, which you can, I believe, the deputy auditor kind of explained to you how that could be important to know. And actually, I followed up with the deputy auditor about what this language means, because it's not defined.
Yeah.
What client entity staffing means. And his belief was that this is other agencies, AHS, DOT, other state departments, state agencies, that when they work with ADS, they may have costs to comply with ADS's, work demands. And that would be the staffing costs. The cost of that agency using their workers or independent contractors to carry out the work required through the ADS project, if that makes sense. The client entity staffing, to me, that was a bit unclear, but if that might be what the language is used in that industry, I don't know. But just kind of throwing that out there, it's not defined. A couple things before I go to D. I mentioned how client entity is not defined. Also, IT projects is not defined. And this is kind of a bigger question as to, the agency gets to define what is and what is not an IT project. And I think maybe most people can kind of like, oh yeah, this is fixing a road is not an IT project. Replacing a server is an IT project. But, is a telecommunications project an IT project? Is a broadband project an IT project? Some of the stuff is maybe not so cut and dry, black and white. That's one thing. So you can define IT projects. Secondly, the total cost of $500,000 or greater. That maybe is more black and white. However, you're not defining what goes into that cost. You're not giving them a list of, when determining what the total cost of a project is, please include this. So the agency is providing what they believe would be a cost as to this $500,000. And I say this because that's kind of a bright line, that 500,000. If they say a project is going to cost only 495,000, obviously they would not have to keep records of that project. And there really isn't a check on that authority for them to make that calculation, other than you asking them, bringing them in here and saying, why do we have so many projects that are 495,000, 485,000? Again, this is hypothetical, but I'm just giving you examples of how when you don't define something, it allows others to come up with those.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's highlighted in your doc.
Yeah, I have it just right now.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I have it in my notes. I have that to bring up.
Okay.
There's no language in this version, but if the committee thinks it's a good idea, then we can talk about.
Okay, so you've got it in your notes.
Yeah.
All right.
And then the independent expert review. I already went over this. If there's a project with, again, this is not also defined $1 million, but again, you can kind of define what goes into the costs for those projects if you'd like to. This is explaining what the independent review shall include. The change here, again, I already went over it, is the CIO changing that language from his or her to CIO. And then we're adding a new subsection at the end, which is the publicly accessible project dashboard. I get a suggestion from the deputy auditor. The agency shall maintain a project dashboard on its publicly accessible website that provides the current status of all IT projects with a total cost of $500,000 or greater. The dashboard shall include the original and current estimated date of completion and the original and current estimated budget. And I want to, and that's the end of the bill, but I want to show you this dashboard. So it's my understanding, and Lisa might be able to chime in, Madam Chair, about this, but this is the current publicly accessible dashboard. And I believe this is in the audit as well. One thing to note here is that they're doing this without statutorily being told to do it. So they're already providing this this dashboard. This committee bill would just kind of confirm that, yes, please continue to produce this dashboard. Not only that, but currently they show the estimated completion date and the estimated cost. This bill would require they also put the original cost and the original estimated cost. And you can kind of see how things have changed over the days, weeks, months, years.
And then could we note in the language, or could you make a note where it, and maybe they already do this, but then I feel like the rating system should reflect that as well. In other words, you know, if the original, and like I said, maybe they already do this, but if the original cost and date were this and that, and then we have upgraded the cost and shifted out the date, in my mind, that no longer merits a green check mark. I think the benchmarks should be the original date and the original cost, not how they're doing against the revised. I don't know. You have a thought? I agree.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of agree with you, but also, if a project, if, you know, say a project that comes back to us and we can say, okay, that's, I understand it's gonna cost more, it's gonna take longer, and there's rational reasons, and then it just continues to be
Show
shown.
yellow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
a
know
really
what the
good
right-
point.
I don't know what the right answer is, but
Well, maybe as long as you can see the originals. Rep. Klebner?
You know, I wonder if both the report to us and or the dashboard, and maybe it's just one or the other, but if we don't want a column that says why. A comments column, for instance,
Yeah,
if, and we had this example of a project that has started and then the legislature adds more requirements, which changes the budget and the date. You know, I think, and it gets, I don't know if the added complexity is worth the added information, but I would think if there was some statutory change to the project, that it's okay to have a green check mark if you're on the new budget and on the new timeline.
yeah.
But if it just flamed out because they underestimated the number of hours and days it would take to do whatever they need to do, then you're right. I think it should reference the original date and budget.
We looked at something the other day that did have those.
I would think in A4, not so much on this, but maybe on this, like the language is the original and the current. Whereas what I'd like to see is every time it gets changed, there's a line item. So IT projects could change 4 or 5, 6 times, you know, so we get to see, at least on this form that they put out, project specific forms. You have the original date. Every time it gets changed substantially, there's another, whether it's cost or finish date, there's another line that goes in. So we're not just looking at the beginning and the end. This could be a 4 or 5 year project, and there's all kinds of changes in the middle that we wouldn't see. So you'd like to see the evolution of the project over time and some explanation about why. Like that would be too much for something like this,
Maybe it could link
but
the,
for their detailed reports, we should have all of that information, I think.
Rep. Selford?
Question for Lisa Gollin, if possible.
Yeah,
A lot of this information is contained in the IPABC form, correct?
I believe some of it is, and some of the comments I had for earlier suggestions, such as business goals, we could ask Secretary Hughes if they're included in those base documents. And surrounding this particular dashboard, remember what they're trying to do when you're doing project management by the standard is they're reporting the current state of the project so they can manage to that. So what we're asking them to do is meet our requirements for reporting accurately on the project as a whole, while enabling them to also manage to the current state of the project.
Would it be possible to have the updated ITABC because it contains the explanations why there was change in costs? Could there be a hyperlink to that, or is that document not going to be public information?
I don't see why it wouldn't be public, but the issue is they only update that at current state at certain stages of the projects. So we would have to ask that question to ADS. Also, if I may, in terms of the limits to the dashboard, this is produced, it's a report off their centralized enterprise project management system. So including projects at lower cost isn't really any more work for them. And if anything, it gives you more insight to the work that's actually being done by ADS in the departments. So I thought that was an important point to make too.
Thank you.
Okay.
I'll go back to the bill so you can see this where it is, but that is the extent of the current suggestions. So any other questions or?
Yeah, no question. Well, I guess it's a question for us. I wonder about linking. We could link that form
Right.
to that dashboard to each of those
Right,
projects.
that's kind of what I said was kind of a hyperlink. So
Okay.
that we could look at that.
Sorry, I missed you something.
Yes, no, that's fine.
Okay, so we have no more testimony on this bill this week. However, I sent the draft language to Secretary Riley Hughes, and she's looking it over. And then we have asked her to see if she could come in next Tuesday so that we can get feedback from ADS on the language. And not sure. I think that we thought if we're going to move ahead with this bill, I think that we had thought that we might get the auditor's office back in and maybe Lisa give you some time just to stay in touch with us as the language evolves. So we're sure to be incorporating your thoughts. And unless I hear otherwise, I'm not at this point thinking of a broader witness list but just be keeping that in mind. So that's sort of the arc. That's sort of the plan for this proposed legislation. We've got a draft. We're going to hear from the agency, most importantly, and some other folks. And then if we like it, we can mark it up. And that's a process that we haven't gone through in this committee, but it's where we literally sit with Ledge Council and we hash out any suggested language changes until we all like it. Or I guess sometimes or majority of us like it. And that's sort of the process with the bill. So we take all of our testimony, committee discussion. If we want to move it to the floor, we mark it up. We get it to a point where the language reflects either unanimous, consent from all of us, or, the majority of the committee is really okay with it. And then we would vote it out and send it to the floor. Yeah.
But one more thing that Lisa brought up is that in this dashboard language, the statute would call for only projects with a total cost of 500,000 or more. Currently, that dashboard shows projects that are under 500,000 as well.
Right.
So if you want to, keep having them include those projects, you could change that language or just have a lower cost or get rid of the cost of it all. It'd be up to you to determine what that should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rep. Kleffner?
That doesn't exclude projects lesser than $500,000. The language I'm looking at, it just requires the ones above it. Is that accurate?
Yeah, but when you require something
Yeah.
at a certain amount, that gives an ability to say, we didn't require us to show under 500,000. So yeah, they still might, right? They still might voluntarily give you projects that are 450,000. But the language would not require it.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. More questions on this?
Just on that topic, what is there a limit? Is there a floor?
All
Or
I
is it
know is
all?
what we currently can see, and Lisa might be able to answer that better, but, for example, this one here, you can see this. No, you can't see it because I stopped sharing my screen. There we go. This AHS one, number 4 down the row, is at 459. You have one at 169, another AHS project. On the below, here's one 87,000. GMCB document management system. So it appears they're including just about every project in their dashboard. IT project.
If I could, if you know from the testimony of DCF, they actually had the replacement of the one system covered by 2 different phases, and it's considered 2 different projects. So it's interesting to see both at the same time, because together they might be less than 500,000, but I mean, one might be less, but together they would be more. And it's just really interesting to see all the things that ADS is doing, as well as all of the work that individual departments are doing that might get overlooked if it's not included.
Okay. That's really interesting. I like to walk these. Okay. I think, thank you. We have our next.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Rick, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We'll see you later.
Bye.
All righty. Moving along, we have our next witness coming at 10, but this should be plenty of time. So for the record,
Ellen Tchaikovsky, Office of Legislative Counsel. Today I'm here on H125. I'm going to do the walkthrough of that. And so I am not going to put it on the screen. It's a very short bill. It's on your website, and I think you're getting physical copies right now.
I have one.
So you did hear, I think, the brief introduction by Representative Sibilia last week. So H125 is an act relating to reporting on the energy transition. It's pretty short. So it's one section, and it's adding a new section to Title 30, Chapter 89, which is the Renewable Energy Chapter. And we could discuss if it maybe needs to go somewhere else, but the intent was to look at energy transition. And so this is part of the renewable energy. I added it to the renewable energy chapter. So energy transition economic impacts report. On or before January 15th of each year, the Department of Public Service, in consultation with the relevant state agencies, shall publish a report on the economic impacts of the clean energy transition in the state. The report shall include the number of gas stations operating within the state, and if there was any change in the number in the prior year. On to page 2. The number of heating fuel sellers operating in the state, and if there was any change in the number in the prior year. The number of electric vehicle supply equipment in the state, and if there was any change in the number in the prior year. And that's the defined term that we use in statute to refer to charging stations. The electric rates and whether there were any changes. The number of renewable energy development companies operating within the state, and with the number of renewable energy development companies operating within the state. This is not a defined term, and we can talk about what maybe that term should be there, but you can hear from Representative Sibilia what her intent was. So the state agencies that collect data related to the topics in subsection B of this section shall provide the department with the relevant data for this report. And it takes effect on passing. So there are 5 things listed in this report. Most of this data already exists, but it's in different places. And I started looking into who the relevant state agencies would be for each. And I couldn't find all of it, but I do think most, if not all of it, is already being collected. So starting for number 2, so heating fuel cellars. We do know that as part of the Clean Heat Standard, the PUC was required to have the fuel cellars in the state register with them. And so they are maintaining a list of fuel cellars, but also fuel cellars in the state have to pay the fuel tax. And so the tax department has information on who is paying the tax on heating fuel. So they probably would be contributing to this report. As far as electric vehicle charging stations, the Agency of Transportation does have a report that they produce every year on electric vehicle charging stations. I'm not super familiar with that report, and it was slightly unclear to me if it included all the private charging stations in addition to the ones that have been funded with public dollars. But the U.S. Department of Energy has those numbers, and so their dashboard has a lot of this data. That could probably be pulled pretty easily from it after verification. The PUC tracks electric rates. They're the ones who approve the electric rates every year. And so there aren't necessarily changes every year to every utility's individual rates, but they would know what changes had occurred because they would have been the ones to approve them. Although there is a recent statute from 2022, I believe, that did allow some of the utilities to make minor incremental changes on their electric rates under alternative rate making, and so they would also need to check with the utilities to see if they had done a smaller rate change in the last year. But again, that should be data they could get pretty easily by just reaching out to the utilities. And then, so as far as number 5, we'll skip number 5 for a second. Number 1, the number of gas stations operating within the state. So I was looking into this. I don't, is it ag? Okay, so the Agency of Ag. So I think you should get a little more information on how this is being tracked. And I don't know if you want to speak to that.
Also be,
Excuse me.
I'm sure. Also be A&R because of the underground storage tanks.
So that was my initial thought. And the Agency of Ag regulates weights and measures. And so I don't know. I think underground storage tanks does include more than just gas stations. And so, okay, so do you know if they track individual gas stations too?
I don't know the answer. Right.
Okay, so I couldn't figure that out quickly yesterday, but I do think it's either or both of those agencies has that data.
Yep.
So again, this is information that's sort of out there, but would be compiling it in one place. And then finally, number 5 could potentially need a little more clarification, but I don't know if anyone is tracking the number of companies that are doing renewable energy development work in the state. My only initial thought was the Secretary of State does require businesses to register with the state. So Vermont companies that do this work, they would potentially have data on, but I don't know how. Well, anyways, they probably aren't specifically looking at that type of company, but also you could request information from them potentially. So
PUC would have information about projects, right?
Well, they would have information
out of state companies.
So they would have information on projects, but I think it would be interesting to know more about Representative Sebelia's definition here of who these companies are. Is it just solar developers? Are we talking about so I was thinking like electric generation projects, but I didn't know if there's energy storage companies. There are a few of those in Vermont.
So I am looking for, are there techs that, can install heat pumps? How many types of, who's doing
workforce stuff.
Workforce, which
Okay.
I don't think we have that.
Okay. Yeah.
Or weatherization, like who's doing weatherization?
Okay.
Who's doing,
I have a
tech work?
question. Did other people have their hands up? No. Okay. Sorry, my head was down. I was thinking, I didn't see if I missed any hands. So I have a question about this, I think for Rep. Sebelia. I'm trying to get in my mind like a real clarity about what it is, what information we're trying to gather and why. And because I'm really interested in this idea.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to hone this in. Is it, I'm not sure that the report is on the economic impacts of the clean energy transition. In my mind, I'm starting to wonder if this is a report on sort of the state of the clean energy economy in Vermont. Because when I think about impacts, I think about on Vermonters. That's just where my mind goes. So, I'm trying to move from here to like the number of gas stations. Well, how does that impact Vermonters? And I don't think that's where, in my mind, we could bring clarity to this if we said, if this is what you're even getting at, that what we're trying to quantify is what is happening in Vermont's renewable energy economy. What is the current state of businesses, services, and employees, skilled trades that are delivering the clean energy economy across the state? And in my mind, when I put it that way, maybe that doesn't make it more clear for anybody around the table. It makes it more clear to me, because then I'm understanding, well, we want to know where gas stations are and if they're consolidating or if there are fewer of them. We want to know where EV chargers are and how they're expanding. We want to know where their weatherization services and companies and how many people they employ. We want to know, the other stuff. So is that making any sense?
It is when we, but my goal is for both the administration and the legislature to have a clear understanding of how Vermonters are experiencing this energy transition and who is at risk of being left behind. By, there's no more gas station, for 30 miles. And also there are no public EV charging stations for, 45 miles. This is not good.
So in my mind, we need to make sure we gather all the right data so that we can then extrapolate.
I also had written on here that I think we should be asking,
Where's
and
the
I'm not sure
analysis?
what it is exactly,
So
that we need an
Right,
analysis.
okay, so there wasn't an analysis initially included, because really right now, this is like, we know that most of this, as I drafted it, was most of this data exists, but it's in a bunch of different places with a bunch of different agencies.
Mhm.
And this would at least put it in one place. Then there could be a next step of analysis, but that is not what I did.
And another thing I think that we might want to include in here is just considering the energy burden report as well as a part of this.
Rep. Southworth?
Yeah, two things. First, I'm kind of leaning to where this would be more into a commerce
Yes.
committee than our committee. And secondly, I looked at this before too, and I'm like, all these reports are available. Why are we taxing somebody to put them all together when they're readily available for us to just ask and get? And that's where I'm kind of stuck.
I have a quick comment and then, I actually have Title IX open on my,
I have an answer.
okay. And my thought was, about if all of this, one thing that I think the legislature struggles with in trying to make good policy is that, it's kind of a part-time citizen legislature. If the information exists here, 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 and we don't necessarily have the authority or the bandwidth, honestly, to have somebody pull it all together. I see the value in getting it delivered to us. Did you have, and then you did?
Yeah, I would very clearly in my mind is what has happened with telecommunications infrastructure, and that, the situation that has developed in rural Vermont without competition and with the legacy copper lines that, a number of our constituents, are still struggling with. That information, some of that information was available. So what the for-profit companies, were giving to the regulated entity that people are relying on, which was the copper landline. We knew what was happening to the copper landline. We had no idea what was happening with for-profit companies, and no one was really reporting to us or elevating for us that it's an emergency what has happened in rural Vermont in terms of their ability to call for help. And so I think the fact that we collect a lot of this data makes it easier. It's for me, I would like the administration to make sure that they are thinking about, do we have that situation happening again, like it was with telecommunications in terms of energy? And for us to be thinking about that. And I mean, the administration runs government. So, we would want their advice about, if they're going to have better information about what is happening on the ground. But it could really help us inform what are necessary policies in terms of making sure that we're not leaving people behind. So.
Yeah, I, in addition to the analysis, I was thinking of the goals because, a dashboard is useful.
Yeah.
But, and we were just looking at one. But what's really nice to know is, for me, like, how is an energy transition proceeding in terms of, is it a just transition? How do we define a just transition? Like, that seems like something that maybe the climate action office would own, and that, so I guess I would say if you're going to do an exercise of data gathering, it should be in service to some sort of plan that has defined goals, as well as a way to do analysis.
Thank you. I'm stuck on it, the information being there, and then asking another agency to collect it all. It just seems very redundant. And we're all about streamlining. The information is readily available to us, and we could get it. I don't see the benefit in doing this, but that's my opinion. I just wanted to say that because it just means more work than somebody else. Once you put more work, it means more money. I don't see where the benefit is with this.
I think Representative Torres' idea about having climate action tackle this seems like a really good idea. And maybe we should have them in to see how they feel around whether this kind of information is already stuff that they collect. And maybe it would not be a big lift for them to do it.
Jack, can you add to the witness list for next week? We should get Jane Lazarchuk in from the Climate Action Office.
Yep.
Yeah, Representative sorry. Yep.
I would have concerns about when you talk about things like weatherization or renewable energy, that we may be not able to collect some data because of the part-timers may say somebody who works during the day for a plumbing company, but installs heat pumps for friends and relatives, or what we used to call under the table, or sideline. And I don't know how many of them there are. I know that in my contacts of neighbors and relatives who have had after-hour installations to make them affordable, because they're not included in that group that's subsidized by, in my area, Homeworks or Western Work, whatever the energy agencies are.
So when we had the municipal, I'm gonna say the wrong word, it's not the technical assistance, it was the municipal buildings project.
It's BGS.
Yeah, but this is the name of it. Wasn't
Yeah.
So it was grants for municipalities to weatherize their buildings. And it was a pot of money, that federal money, so it was kind of a one-time opportunity, a lot of money, time sensitive. And as BGS was looking to do this and the RPCs were looking to work with BGS, it became kind of clear, like, we're gonna have a real shortage of entities that can assist the towns in these projects. So one of the things we were talking about was, just not to the level of how many employees do you have, but even just how many entities are there? So we could have the Secretary of State talk about, how many and where these types of companies are located within the state, which could also highlight a business opportunity for someone. And I agree with you that, I think commerce, there's commerce opportunities here. It's highlighting potential business opportunities as well.
Yeah, I tend to agree with Rep Southward. I don't really see why we need this. It just doesn't, if you need to find out about a gas station and are we gonna get rid of the thing that's going on in A&R about fuel dealers? That if this is gonna,
What thing?
the registry, if you're gonna have this place, have this all come in, are you taking it from that area or?
What?
Isn't there a registry of fuel dealers? It's still.
PUC,
PUC.
clean heat.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, those are the fuel importers, isn't that correct?
It's just getting at different data.
Yeah.
It's everybody. The PUC is collecting data from everybody that sells heating fuel.
Well,
and
not just
so-
the importers.
Correct. They're collecting it from everyone,
Oh,
the
okay.
full universe. And so the PUC is not doing any specific analysis with that information. This isn't asking for analysis except for if there has been a change. And so at least when I initially was doing the drafting, I think you're having conversations about, but I was thinking about like that lined up with looking at, this is the number of heating fuel dealers. It has not changed since last year, or it has dramatically gone down since last year. Is different from what the PUC not doing anything like any analysis with that information currently.
Yeah. So the reason I think that information is really valuable is, we have private businesses that, want to be regulated by the market, and that means that they are counting on customers to choose them over their competitors for quality and price. And that's how we expect quality and price to be managed, because there's a lot of competition. So we're already seeing consolidation within the delivered fuels sector, which means we are seeing a reduction in competition, which means we are seeing threat to rate and quality regulation, and perhaps shouldn't say we are. That could lead us to the place like our communications infrastructure. So that's what I am wanting to make sure that we are thinking about. Who's thinking about? Who is monitoring? And does it matter? So I think it matters actually to make sure. I think it matters in Vermont that my constituents have the ability to get delivered fuels to their home to stay warm in the wintertime.
But if you find that change and it's a year later, how does that help you? If you find out that this fuel oil company has moved out of your area.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm coming in today.
Mm-hmm.
I followed Fred Energy coming down. So somebody down here in Montpelier came from Morrisville all the way down to Montpelier. So somebody's filling that need.
Yeah, it's not helping me. I mean, it's slow, right? So how does it help me that a year later is a great question. What if it's not until 10 years later that I actually understand that, oh boy, we lost 50%, or 5 years later, we've lost 50% of our fuel sellers in this state. And that is having a pretty dramatic effect on rates and quality. And you all will find that it can take a lot of time for us to react or even come to agreement with an administration on what to do. So I would love us to all have some shared information about what is happening in the market, which may make it easier for us to act in agreement and have some shared data about what's going on.
Brett Southworth?
Again, it seems more like a commerce thing. 100%. It does. When you have companies consolidating whatever, that's commerce. That isn't. And I fail to make that correlation. Again, I don't see where this is needed at this point.
Okay. Representative Allen?
I see that you're shrinking the market by transferring some of these heat that's delivered to energy that's delivered through fixed power lines. And so if the market is shrinking, then the number of dealers is going to shrink and the cost is going to go up because the miles of the vehicle have to be driven increased. And then to add on top of this, any accounting that adds to the cost that's not a driver putting, in this case, fuel oil into a delivery point. Fewer delivery points, less quantity, just adds to the cost. And yes, competition historically reduces cost to the consumer, which reflects in less of a margin for the operator. But if the operator and the fuel dealer has anything that's adding to his cost, that cost is going to get transferred down to the consumer.
Real quick, and then I want to respect Ellen's time. I don't think we're really walking through the bill anymore.
All right.
Hey, I told you it was only gonna take me less than 90 seconds to walk through the bill.
And
so.
we have I'll Rep. Kleppner go, and then so we have our next guest here, number one, and two. I sort of came to and realized that we are no longer walking through the bill. I'm sorry. Representative Kleppner?
So if I understand Representative Sebelia's concern, it's that a Vermonter with an oil furnace will find themselves with no one who is willing to deliver oil to their house.
That's one concern.
And no one willing to deliver propane and kerosene. Yes. And this is, you're right, Madam Chair, we have strayed from the bill. But it does seem to me that we probably have a pretty good idea where the oil furnaces are and the distributors who are currently serving them. And I think a little bit of analysis would tell us who's at most risk of losing their primary source of heating. And we could then take action to ensure that one way or another, they are not left without a way to heat their homes.
Okay, so let's see, the arc of this bill, we've scheduled some testimony next week to get input from a whole bunch of different agencies and people to see what they think of this idea. And yes, and Stu, can we take a 2-minute break and start at 10:05?
Yeah.
Okay, Ellen, thank you so much.
Thanks, Ellen.
You want to go off?
Yeah.
live?